Welcome to the ReZero podcast. I'm your host, Wolf. You may know me as the voice actor for Subaru in our Arc 5 readings of the ReZero web novel. Today, we will be discussing and analysing our required side story content for Arc 7. Join me and my wonderful co-hosts as we have a big analysis of this. Would you please introduce yourselves, gentlemen?
Yeah, I'm Gold, and I am one of the co-founders of this project. I also voice Roswell. I also voice Felix and Sirius as well. I voice 3 characters, and I'm here as the third voice. I like to think of myself as the first voice, but I'm the third voice here today.
And I'm Connor. I'm the voice of Julius and Kiritaka, and one of the managers for our group, and ready to get on with some of this. I even actually missed some of this required reading when I was first going through Arc 7. So I'm glad we went back and did this. Yeah, I missed that last, the last Dragon Nation and the last Provisional Rem.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm glad you got to get something new out of this episode today as well. That's really nice to hear. But I guess we'll give a bit of context for the audience here. So we're currently at, we've just started Phase 4, right, of Arc 7?
Yes, Phase 4 is next.
Yeah. And Connor here told us that we would have some side story content that we would need to read before continuing to read the main story. So those side stories are what we're covering today. Stuff that includes some Priscilla side story content that gives us context as to why Priscilla is even in Vollachia in the first place. Some extra stuff about the Emilia camp without Subaru, being like, oh my god, Subaru's gone. We need to sort everything out before we even go to rescue him. And also some stuff with Rem, which, all in all, I really enjoyed reading these side stories. We also did have some optional reading for some specific Vollachia stuff that we'll get to at the end if... just because it's not as important.
Right, that's more of the true definition of side story.
Yeah.
Genuinely, the fact that, at the very least, the Priscilla side of this and the Emilia camp side of this is not in the main storyline is astonishing to me. I'm certain that if this gets animated, both of those are going to be included.
Yeah, I think they're important contextual bits and bobs that I feel like, sure, they are structurally kind of, out there. I think it'd be hard to justify fitting them within the content of any arc, especially at Subaru's perspective. But also at the same time, I think they definitely flesh out a lot of what is going on behind the scenes and give you answers to questions like, why haven't they come around yet? Why are they here? What is some interesting character building going on behind the scenes with Rem's case when we get into this. That is all stuff that I think is nice. And I think some of the scenes as well with Rem are stuff that definitely could be added into the anime just because I think they're compelling.
Easily.
And yeah, I think it's nice and it's easier to swap perspectives in a directorial format such as that. But yeah, I think all these are required reading for a lot of reasons because I think they just definitely, I'd say, like bolster the tone and the overall quality of the arc in general. So I think, yeah, do yourself a favor and go ahead and read these as we go along and with us, as we will definitely have more side stories in the future that we'll have to be reading. But this is the first batch of those stories.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There's
go ahead.
As a go-ahead point from Gold, which I think he made a very good point. These stories genuinely add. It's not even just context, but a lot of like flavor and character stuff. So, as Gold says, if you haven't read these for whatever reason, and you're currently reading Arc 7 with us, or have already read Arc 7, do yourself the favor of reading these. They're worth your time.
Yeah, I'll make sure the full list of all the stories we talk about in this episode are in the description for this video as well. But in case you are just listening, the ones that we're hitting are Priscilla's Cheers for Me, the Dragon Nation / Missing Child Search Chronicles / Stand By Me Pleiades, which is intermixed with it, and Provisional Rem's Paranoia. We have Priscilla's Cheers for Me, Shadows of Conspiracy, Declaration of War, Presentiments of Chaos, Then we have the 5 Dragon Nations, Stand By Me Pleiades 1 and 2, as well as the first 5 of Provisional Ram's Paranoias. And then the
And,
optional ones we're covering are
yeah.
Death Unto the Weak, No Mercy 1 and 2.
Yeah, I think we'll try to put those in the description just in case you guys are curious and you need them all listed out there. And yeah, you'll be able to follow along with where we're going, and we're going to doing them in order of the ones that we just listed.
Yes. Effectively, as much as I could, I kept that in chronological order. It's not quite perfect, but it's as perfect as it's going to get. And the reason I wanted to make sure that we covered these is, as we're titling this, it's required reading for it. There's a lot of explanation or even revelations that happen kind of in Arc 7, but aren't properly set up or explained or established. Like, there are some facts about characters that are just dropped mid-sentence, like it's no big deal later on. Or we don't really ever see how they accomplish something or why someone is here properly. You're just kind of expected to go along with it. And this provides that understanding for where everything is and what it's all set up. I probably should have done the Priscilla's Cheers for Me before we got there, but I wanted to keep Priscilla showing up as much of a surprise as I possibly could.
Yeah, sadly, I already knew this all beforehand, at least her showing up.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, because obviously she's in the cover of a lot of these things and whatnot, but also it's just a fact that you kind of know. There's a lot of interesting implications. I mean, the thing is, all this stuff is so important that you're right. They could and probably should have dropped in the main story just because it's so, I don't know, shocking at first initially for some people. But there was definitely foreshadowing in there the entire time. And obviously, I mean, look at her. Doesn't she look like she belonged to Vollachia?
I mean, she's literally the color of the Yang sword.
Yeah, exactly. And she has those imperial qualities.
So the first one that we're going to cover today is Priscilla's Cheers for Me, Shadows of Conspiracy, Declaration of War, and Presentiments of Chaos, which is the explanation for why Priscilla decided to go to Vollachia in the first place when she did. Now, these stories pick up effectively during Arc 6, really close after everything is resolved in Arc 5. We see like Cole getting his comeuppance for effectively kidnapping Felt in that. We see the dynamic exists, or as it exists within the Priscilla camp proper. And fortunately for us, we get to see things from Al's perspective.
Yes. This is the biggest thing about these side stories, which I absolutely love, and which is why I feel like you need to at least give these a read. These are from Al's perspective. No one else but Al's. Apart, I think there's like one moment that transitions away from Al in the first side story of these 3, but it's majorly focused on Al's perspective of how he sees things happen. And that's really important as we go through these stories, because we learn so much more context clues about his authority than we've ever known before.
So the main premise of this is Priscilla is attacked by random pirate ninjas.
Well,
I'm using that term
not at the same
loosely.
time. Not at the same time. Let's not be crazy.
Let's separate the pirates and the ninjas here, okay?
Yeah,
You're right. You're totally right. It is separate. But assassins in black from another country.
Yes, setting the tone into this thing with all of you listening along. All of these, after the events at Priscilla, the Priscilla camp, her faction, which is pretty much only 3 other named characters, Schultz, Al, and Heinkel, are coming back along carriage ride back to her. Is this just her estate that she's coming back to?
I think it's technically she doesn't have a duchy. She has a barony.
She has a barony.
It's her barony.
Yes,
right.
The Barriel barony. Yeah.
So she goes back to her mansion, and basically Heinkel is, blubbering and being like, well, sorry
It's
for
not
being
my
such
fault,
a pathetic. Yeah, sorry for being so pathetic. And she's like, yeah, you are very pathetic. You seem very pathetic back there. And really, basically she's like, yeah, well, you're gonna have to prove that you're not pathetic, because I hate talking to you because you're annoying, right? But then she mentions Schultz, her little servant. How much explaining has Schultz been had up to this point? Because I think he has had the most dialogue here in these side stories than any place else, right?
At least so far in the story, yeah. I mean, all
Yeah.
we've seen of Schultz in the anime is he drives Priscilla's cart and
Yeah.
walked behind her, dragging her veil, I think. Other than that, it's nothing. She just has this 8, 9-year-old adorable little boy that follows her around.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
don't think
And
he
he's
actually
such a
has a
little
proper
gentleman.
job.
He's being raised up to be a proper gentleman. But basically, Priscilla's thirsty, talking to all this, talking to this bum, and she's like, Schultz, my water pitcher's empty. My good looks are going to fade away to nothing with how thirsty I am. And then he leaves. And in this, I get the feeling that she understood that she was just about to be attacked and wanted Schultz to be safe somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
And also to
Sentiment
give
room.
Heinkel like the ability to undividedly defend her, because she has impression that she is giving him a test of sorts.
Yeah, I mean, she knew it was going to come. I'm pretty sure she pulls out the Yang sword before they even break through the window.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't the first or last time she's had to survive assassins, is what we're getting the feeling of.
Yeah.
Um,
And to her, it's almost like a common everyday. Oh, this is every Sunday the assassins come by, we kill them.
Yeah, it's a little bit of pastime, but basically, like only people who could survive attempts like this are able to stay at her side. But yeah, as Schultz is away, here's Al, and Al defends Schultz's life, and it seems to do it with just like a gash in the shoulder, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
He only got cut once.
he only got cut once, yeah. But he says pretty much, let's see if I get the exact quote around here. I don't think he says it here. Yeah, he says it later, perhaps. But basically, they reunite with Priscilla and Heinkel, and they're both completely fine. All the people have been cut down. Al cut down his assassin. Heinkel pretty much soloed all the other assassins,
Yeah.
which is interesting. I mean, we never got the impression through Arc 5 that he was actually competent at all.
He is, vice commander of the Imperial Knights?
Yes,
Yeah, initially, I mean, it's easy to assume. I mean, I assumed that it was probably just nepotism, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Or
that's
this
exactly-
sort of,
that's
like,
exactly
born
what I-
into
Like,
this grand lineage, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
you're right. In the fantasy story like this, it's hard to believe that something like that could exist. You know what I mean? Like somebody could just be there through nepotism.
And as
Well, Go ahead.
as Gold said, my first impression was that it was just nepotism, right? That like he was just there because he was that high-ranking status, and it was to be there as a title. And up until this point in the main story, we've never seen Heinkel really prove himself with the blade either. Whenever we've seen him potentially attempt to fight, it's been with people that he has an emotionally complex relationship with, and that's why he's been cowering, it seems, rather than him being like an actually bad combatant. At least that's
It's
the
also
context
just he's a trained swordsman in this world. Even if he's not like actually competent compared to most of the knights, he's probably still far more lethal than Al would be in a single run through of it.
Yeah.
Just because
Well,
he has that training, he has that mana flowing through him.
Yeah, well, I get the impression that it's a bit more than that, and we'll get to
Yeah.
that later. But basically, these are 4 trained assassins, let's say under a shinobi, right? Under the directive of whoever runs this ninja village or whatever. And basically, the idea. I mean, I'm assuming it's probably Duncan, Albert, whatever his name is.
Olbart Dunkelken.
Okay, thank you. I got his names mixed up in a row. Okay, Old Dunkelkin, and basically, like, I honestly think that this entire thing, you don't just take on 5 ninjas at once. Even like without context, no matter what world we're in, if somebody said, "Yeah, I took on 5 ninjas at once," I'm not thinking, "Well, that guy, he just learned a few sword skills." I'm like, well, it would make sense to me, right? Because when you think about it, he at one point had a very happy life growing up and still under the 2 strongest swordsmen of the kingdom. So like it makes sense that he probably got some training with either through Wilhelm or through Theresia. That's just my impression.
Yeah. I'll speak more on Heichel's swordsmanship in particular and like what I think it means, like from a thematic and like his own character perspective, a bit later in a Rem side story where we get a bit more context to it. But as that baseline, yeah, we see that Heinkel is competent. He kills those. It's implied that he kills those assassins by himself without help from Priscilla too, right? Like he just does it single-handed.
Yeah.
I mean, at least implied. Who knows whether Priscilla just made an impact or not? We don't see it from that perspective for a reason.
I have a feeling, at least from her character perspective, I think it would make the most sense if she was letting Heinkel deal with it himself.
And yeah, I think she was just testing him for the most part. She didn't really need to do anything.
Want blood on her dress.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, pretty much.
But there's one assassin who's alive, and Al is, Al's being directed once there, even though he's wounded, to go and interrogate him. But pretty much like, he's like, Al's like, you think one of the other candidates sent this our way? And then she's like, no, I mean, anybody running as a candidate here wouldn't do something so petty, knowing that obviously it wouldn't work. Like a trick of this caliber on me, like they'd have to be fools, right? But also this probably has nothing to do with the kingdom anyways. And it's like, even with the kingdom, not even just the candidates, and it's like, and then Priscilla's like, this is pretty much the wolf that did this to me, right? And
then wolf of swords, or the sword wolf.
Yeah, pretty much the sword wolf. And it gave a very dramatic response. And then the guy dies, and I was like, what?
Well, because he knows,
yes.
As a little point, I just do want to point out the way that this assassin died was by consuming some hyper lethal poison that was contained within a tooth.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is
classic cyanide.
Classic trope.
Yeah, classic, ninja trope, or like a spy trope. Sorry. And pretty much, like these people are really resolved, right? So like, as Al's saying, but yeah, they go and start being like, really, like, this place is, yeah. Oh yeah, and Al's like poisoned, right, as well.
Yeah, he eventually passes out and realizes that the one nick he got was a lethal enough thing of poison that it does kill him. And we basically jump to him being done after however many attempts it took him to get through that fight without taking even a single scratch.
Yeah, he goes back to do it. Yeah.
A couple like extra like analysis details after we've had our little summary of this story, which I thought was really interesting, is we get a lot of characterization with Al here, like way more than I was expecting.
Yeah, I talked about summarizing it, but this his dialogue here is very interesting. I would say, just like how reticent he is. I mean, we've gotten this before in a way, but there's a lot of like, I would say like reasonable hesitancy throughout this entire thing, right?
Yeah.
Where even though he's competent, with his power and stuff like that, there is a sense that he is averse to conflict.
Well, it's going to be hours and hours and hours of just painful deaths over and over and over again for him.
Yeah. To note that as well, like as they're traveling back through the carriage from Priscilla, Al is complaining to Priscilla about how this is going to make their public image look bad because they're leaving before the other candidates are doing stuff as well. And
he's always trying his best because he's really the only one he feels that can tell Priscilla some harsh truths.
Yeah.
And
or at least he thought so.
Yeah, at least
we'll get there. We'll get there anyways. But like the idea is that for him, he feels like he's afforded some sort of, chiding. Like, even though we'll get to it, she's aware of how she looks, and she's not going to let people try to swear.
Yeah.
I think it's better to talk about Al's character more when we get into the next story as well.
That is the end. These stories are pretty short.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. They're short.
Story here.
That's why I'm like, let's go.
I think the important parts, it's just, I want to ask you two real quick. I mean, Gold, you already gave your answer, but who sent these assassins?
It's obviously Albert. I like it, or at least
under directive of Chisha Gold or whoever is leading. Or whatever.
Okay, that's more of what I was getting to. If you thought that this was Chisha or Vincent for the story's purpose.
It's definitely
Sending
Vincent,
Yeah.
not
after
Abel.
them.
Because Vincent not able. My reasoning for this is because I think they want Priscilla back. I don't think they think it's gonna kill her. I think they want, because as Priscilla says, it's like, we'll get to it, but she's like, honestly, the only way to end this is there is going to be no end to this, because this is Vollachia. Even if we killed them, it's not going to be the end. It's always going to be like this for us until we go there and deal with it properly.
So
that's the only way to go through it.
my suspicion for this was actually that it wasn't Vincent / Chisha Gold, that it was actually Burstets, the prime minister or whatever his actual title is, because he was there ruling alongside Abel for however long. And whereas Chisha is coming in and taking the place of Abel as Vincent, Burstets helped him perform that coup, and likely
Right.
is the only other one who's old enough and would have been involved with the previous emperor to know of Priscilla's existence.
Yeah, well, I assume Chisha Gold knows who Priscilla is, because he's been Vincent's advisor. I mean, sorry, Abel's advisor since he became on the throne. So he knows that entire history.
Well, Burstets was the advisor, like as that minister, like the person he worked closely with. So that's why it was my suspicion that it was him. Because as we see with Arakia, the Divine Generals don't know that Priscilla's alive.
Well, Vincent and
Chisha's relationship is special.
They both, yeah. I'm not actually. I don't know. I can't say more. I literally can't, because it's part of the X novel. But yeah, I think there's like interesting stuff about who sent what where. Because you're right. I still don't know who exactly sent this. It could be anybody, but I have my suspicions, and I don't know if that ever gets touched upon again.
And then the last thing from this story, or it might actually be from this middle one, is that we do have the hard confirmation that Priscilla is a member of the imperial family. Here, like, genuinely a sibling of Abel.
Actually,
rather casually too.
Yeah.
And it's yeah, I think the way that this is revealed in the side story makes a lot of the side stories feel a lot more important. I mean, obviously all of them are important because a lot of them are very good looks into certain characters, right? But up to this point, has there been a reveal this big in the side story besides, like, I don't know, like Emilia's backstory, like all this different stuff? It's like EX novel quality level stuff.
I don't know. We had some stuff in the interludes that was pretty important.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't call those side stories necessarily, even though they are like optional content.
Yeah, I feel like they're all barely optional at this point. I think he uses them as structural breaks, because obviously he has a very contained idea of what an arc is going to be about, but these link the two, right? So anything that happens in between are like, nebulous in that way.
Right. The fact that this isn't an interlude is more surprising.
That is weird. That's what I mean. Included. Yeah. That's why I'm like, why?
The rest of these stories are like, we're going to take a break for some non-important plot stuff just with this characters that we can see from her perspective. Or we're going to follow this group of characters as they get caught up before they make their entrance and start impacting Arc 7 story content.
Mm-hmm.
Like the whole Dragon Nation missing child search and Stand By Me Pleiades. None of the things they're doing in there, other than going to Vollachia, is relevant to Arc 7. Yeah. It's just, as you see here with introducing, or rather hard stating Priscilla's place as a member of the Imperial family, the rest of these also have just random bits of important information that is also part of the reason why I called these required.
I suppose I'm sure we'll get back to it later in the main story. I think one of the things that he does, Tepe does, is that he thinks of the arcs, or like all that content, as things that are directly related to Subaru's story, and everything else is just sort of, things that he can put inside content, Though I guess like the only exception to that is the kind of stuff in the arc 4 interludes. Like, it's interesting though. I don't know why, because you're right. This would have been a great arc 5 into arc 6 interlude, if I had to guess.
would think so as well, especially
because
because
it
there's
would
only
be like,
3 of
what?
them.
What happened? Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And
It'd
like
be
these
cool.
3
Like,
stories together are like the length of an arc 6 or 7 chapter.
I mean, imagine if, for example, at the end of the season of anime that we're gonna have, if this is just an extra like 12 minutes tacked on or something like that, 10
Oh,
minutes
that'd be
tacked on.
wonderful.
I mean, it would give you a little bit of closure for those characters, but also leave you curious to where they're going next. You know?
So from there, we move on to after Al successfully managing to fight off the assassins along with Heinkel there into the Declaration of War story. I read this in Presentations of Chaos, like very close together a long time ago. So I'm a little murky on what events happen in which ones of these.
I can guide us through this one then. So we cut to after this battle. Al is watching Priscilla's private army. They're called the Red Plates, I believe. Bury the bodies
That's
of these
right, yes.
assassins. It's a rather grim scene too, because Al was like watching it and thinking about how, man, it's almost sort of like I wish I was these guys or something along those lines. It's really dreary. And one of the soldiers is like, "Oh, Al, how are you doing? Are you okay?" And he's like, "Don't worry, bro, I'm okay. I only lost an arm." And he points to the arm that he's had lost for like so many years.
20
And-
years
and-
or whatever.
And the soldier doesn't even laugh. He's like, "I don't even know how to respond to that, man." And Al's like, "Oh, he doesn't get my funny jokes. This is so annoying." And then Al just casually drops that he died 30 times trying to resolve that one situation that we just read.
Yes, that's right. So we see that Al doesn't have a taboo on that like Subaru does.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was like. I didn't know when he said it. I thought he said it at the end of the last chapter, but yeah, he casually drops that, and really, the idea that death was like a condition of it was something that laid some very close to Subaru, and I wasn't sure if that was the case. I thought maybe it was like a, you do a thing, you make a mistake, and then he's like, okay, I can just go back to the start of that scenario. But also, it makes me think, because this is assassin, right? That's automatic, which is even stronger. It's sort of like Subaru's, right? It's like,
Yeah.
he doesn't even have to like think about, okay, I'm activating this thing and I have to hold it, because like we've seen authorities in which, I mean, sometimes they just say it for fun times, maybe, I don't know, but it feels like they have to will it to exist. You know what I mean? But these two authorities just happen almost outside of their will, which is,
I mean, I
proof to
still
their
think that
compatibility,
return by
maybe.
death is done by Subaru's will. He just doesn't remember making the decision every time.
Maybe, yeah.
I do also
But I
think
think-
with Al, you could make the argument that he's actively using it, but he thinks of it as a curse because of the trauma it's inflicted of him. if
Yeah,
that
and
makes
also,
sense.
yeah, because he feels the pain too. Also, the soul, yeah, I guess the way that souls work in ReZero is that the fact that, unless your soul is destroyed, you don't really think about it. I mean, has Super's soul ever been destroyed when he died?
The closest it got was Betelgeuse overcoming him
Yeah.
Okay.
and starting to do that.
I
But that
wonder
was,
if he would restart even then. I don't even know at this point. But yeah,
well, as far as Subaru's testing of it all understands is that it's perfect true time travel because nothing else ever comes back with him.
yeah, I
And,
know
like,
it's dimensional
he doesn't
reset.
feel
Yeah,
the
I know.
pain come back. It's it's when his brain remembers that he was hurting that
Yeah,
he
it's
has
like more like
issues with
phantom
it.
pain, right?
Yes. So I don't think that. I think if his soul had been destroyed, which, I mean, maybe that actually did happen when he merged with everyone inside of Satella in Arc 4.
Mm.
It's hard to tell. Like, we don't really know the full mechanics of
That's
it.
what I mean,
And
because it's like,
only Satella does.
because really, at one point you're like, well, is Subaru wholly invincible? Because all I'm saying is because soul destruction is a very hard concept in ReZero. Like, it's really just like not something you can do easily. Because all that happens when you even abuse your gate is that your soul becomes one with the world, pretty much. Like, you die physically at that point, but then like your stuff
Yeah.
just kind of pours out. It's like, it's weird. It is weird. I don't know, because basically all I'm saying is that I don't know how these things are triggered, but I feel like they're almost automatic, and it makes me curious about why the other, or if the other authorities are automatic.
Well, we know that we know that Unseen Hand, Invisible Providence is not for certain. And while some of
Yeah.
them are, I don't think it's even necessarily tied to the sin because Capella's is clearly something that is done actively, like she makes the choice to
Yeah,
use it
just
on people.
naturally. Yeah.
Whereas with Carmilla, the Faceless Bride was in effect
Yeah,
that,
something she could never control.
yeah, as soon as you approached her, you would stop breathing. Like that
Yeah.
was irrelevant to anything that she was doing.
So it makes me wonder if affinity has something to do with it too. If it's like some, because like you're right, it makes me wonder because these two characters probably sometimes haven't in the past wanted to return by death. You know what I mean? Like, is there like a point in which you just like say no? You know what I mean?
I guess it's just whether the authority affects you or if it affects somebody else.
Yeah,
That's the only pattern I see with them.
you're right. I guess it's like affecting the world or affecting yourself. Yeah,
Is it
right.
insular or is it outward?
Yeah.
It
Which makes sense, but regardless, Al doesn't have a taboo. He jokes about dying 30 times. I mean, I laughed when he joked
I
about
think the
losing his
reason.
arm. I thought that
Me
was
too.
funny.
I would. Also,
yeah, it was quite funny.
it's very clear what he was joking about too. I don't know why this soldier's being weird.
Yeah.
The thing is, right? I think like he has no witch to really force him to taboo anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
far as we
think
know.
that's the reason why.
As
Or
to be fair, as long as we
or
know.
do we know? Oh yeah, not at least not a witch that Cecily looks after him all the time, so we know. And one of the things is that like they're both talking about how unreasonable it is to be under Priscilla because she doesn't tell you anything; she just expects you to figure it out. You know?
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
It's rather interesting as we led in from the last chapter and we talk about like there being no taboo in terms of what death means to Al particularly, because as he dies in the previous chapter and we don't see all the other like attempts he did to sort that situation out, Priscilla calls him by his full name, Aldebaran, and Al's just offended by that on like some deep inner level. He hates it when she uses his full name. It kind of makes him think about like his duty, because he says while he's thinking at the end of the last chapter, he thinks about, don't call me by that name. And as his life falls apart, he thinks about how he swore to himself to never be a following star, something to that degree, and that as he's dying, the stars go around and give him another chance to redeem himself. It's just such an interesting language that Teppei uses there that I think really cements like how similar he is to Subaru, but also how different he is too.
Yeah, they feel very similar in their reminiscences of stuff like this.
As a minor point, the stars go around or the stars go back around in Japanese is effectively saying the same thing as the Earth turned or the Earth turned back.
Yeah.
It's just meaning time is going forward or backwards.
That's kind of what I thought, but it's good to have that confirmed. Thank you, Connor.
But it's important because of the idea of stars and stuff like that.
Yeah,
One thing
I thought it was a neat note, but it might just be a coincidence on that case.
Yeah, it's
part. Go ahead. Yeah.
With all of that in that sense, it's really interesting because we talk about the similarities between Subaru and Subaru and Ao, but Ao is kind of using his authority how Roswell wishes Subaru was using his, because Ao
and
focuses
a lot of the
on
fan base
using
wishes he would use it.
Yeah. Al only uses it to focus on Priscilla. That's his one person he uses it to focus on. Like he appreciates Schultz and seems to want to protect him, but he's specifically using his authority as a device to help Priscilla. But then throughout these stories, he starts to doubt, am I even helping her? She seems to do just fine no matter what I do anyway. So what's the point of me doing this? It's
another interesting part about that too is that he only says Schultz because it would make Priscilla upset if he didn't protect him. I mean, yeah.
He's been kind of molded as Roswell wanted Subaru to be molded into a singular tool to do this one desire and goal.
Well, based on the events that happen in these chapters, I'm assuming that if he does allow Schultz to die, Priscilla's just going to kill Al anyway.
Yeah, because he's like, you're in
anger.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it is probably an act of self-preservation as well.
One thing that I wonder though, Al is very open to talking about stuff like this, and you get that impression that he doesn't care. There's no taboo about it. What does Priscilla? Because Priscilla must know, right? Priscilla must know, but how much does she know? Does she know that it's an authority? Does she know what authority is? I wonder at this point, and I don't know if we have the answer yet. But I think it's one of those things where it's.
Well, I don't know if this was from her perspective or from Al's, but we get a mention that Priscilla is able to just selectively ignore the things he says that wouldn't make
Yes.
sense normally. So I'm assuming when he talks about, oh, I died
Yep.
like 50 times in that fight for you, she's just like playing that off as
Assuming
nothingness.
that it's
But she at least understands that he's not from here.
Yeah.
Because
there's a reason
she's in
why
the conversation with Al and Subaru when they discuss that.
there's a reason why she picked him up. It's not for no reason. As she said, she has a good eye for discerning what's underneath all the weirdness, what's underneath the monk. We'll get to that later.
What's
but
behind the helmet?
yes,
What's
what's
behind the
underneath the helmet? Underneath the helmet. This fall, figure out what's underneath the helmet.
New documentary on sports injuries.
Oh no. But as we were back into the story, we kind of get this information dropped. Oh yeah, Priscilla's like, oh yeah, this assassin stuff definitely came from Vollachia. Blah 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 blah. We should do something about this. And I was like, huh? What? Maybe we shouldn't do anything. I hate that country. I have bad
Cut his head off.
past.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, I lost my arm in the Gladiator Island Gunner Hive.
Yes. Something
Close,
like that.
whatever. Close enough.
People translate it a bunch of ways. It's Gunaheim or whatever.
I called it Gunahive a lot when I was reading through.
Yeah.
I know that's wrong, but
I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be something hive, like a hive of gladiators.
I'll find the hiragana for it while you two talk real quick.
We've
totally
heard
fine.
about him being a gladiator before, at least in Arc 7, from where we've read, but I don't know if we knew exactly where he was located, and that it was a gladiator island, of all things. It's like a really specific thing.
And it's weird because islands in this world doesn't seem to exist really.
Yeah.
So it has to be on a lake, right?
Yeah,
is what we're getting the
what it
impression.
is, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because we learn then that Al has a complicated feelings towards Vollachia in particular, and he doesn't really want to go back there, and he's trying anything possible to dissuade Priscilla to that. We also I didn't actually know the geography of this, but Priscilla's current territory is right on the southern border with Vollachia. Her former husband's territory is right there.
That's right.
And Priscilla's just like, yeah, I left the Empire, I faked my death, because she was fed up of the rule that you couldn't succeed to the throne of Vollachia without first killing all your siblings, which makes it apparent that Priscilla made the active choice to not participate in the succession because she didn't want to kill her siblings. So she probably could have won. Is the implication.
I mean, maybe
she doesn't
could have
seem
won.
any less competent than Vincent.
Yeah, maybe honestly, and one of the things that you kind of get the impression is that really she is not for these arbitrary rules that people put on things, right?
Yeah.
Like to her, the idea of a secession, which she has to kill all these people that maybe she likes, maybe she dislikes, who knows? She has a very hard to please demeanor, but like that was too much, and that's probably why she ran away.
And something else we learn in this section of the side story, which is something I didn't know, and is for, I guess, a bit of context for people that also didn't know. Al hasn't been with Priscilla for like these past 20 years where he's escaped this island. I had the impression that he had escaped this island for like the past 20 years and had been like her guard ever since. But it's only been about 2 years since he's helped foiled her ex-husband's plot, apparently, of some sort, and then joined her. Which I didn't know at all. So this was important context for me for their relationship.
Right, because they only... So the timeline is what, right? So how many years ago did Abel take the throne? It's just Vincent. Vincent take the throne like 7 years ago from the main
7
story.
years ago,
I think 7 years.
And then a few years after that, how many years do you think was there till there in which Priscilla came and took Al from the island?
Well, we don't know for certain. Well, did she get him from the island, or did he just used to be at the island? I don't know if that's actually specified.
Yeah.
Or I know that she gets married like several times within 5 years. Within those 5 years, though.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. So at least, let's say a few relationships that have somehow gotten her entangled with Al has happened. But they've known each other since then for 2 years at this point. Is that what you just said? Yeah. So, yeah, about 2 years before the start of the main story. That makes sense. Yeah.
But Priscilla's like, yo, the only way to settle this problem is to go to Vollachia itself. And Al is just, at this point, he's despondent. He's like, I really don't want to go back. So Al, this is not an exaggeration, by the way, dies 1,000 times to Priscilla beheading him because he speaks up against her doing this. Priscilla kills him. Like, there is nothing he can do to dissuade her from doing this.
I assume that he even tries to phrase it in, like, the most nice and, like, supplicating way, or, like, tries to explain it as thoroughly as possible. But yeah, I guess if it's such a swift death, it's not as bad to repeat, right? So really, it's just like redoing the dialogue option in RPG over and over again, or like reloading your save.
The dialogue.
But it's the fact that he decidedly decides he gives up around the 1,000 mark. Like, he makes that active, like, thing in his head of like, okay, it's been around 1,000 now. This clearly is not going to work. That line of thinking is just that kind of thing of like, wow, this really is the opposite.
Priscilla can see when somebody's waffling. Also, like, even if you try to, like, massage it as well as possible, she can tell what's underneath it. Also think, this is a good point to bring up, is that Priscilla is willing to kill over this perceived weakness. That's how disappointed she is, and Al saying that, even if it's what he truly feels deep down, she's like, because I wonder, right? And this is just my thought: is that do you think Al? This is Al's true feelings, right? Do you think Al has had moments where he's disappointed Priscilla before and she's killed him, and then he just chooses to, and that's why he's not learning his lesson. He's not actually learning how to act properly as her knight.
Exactly.
He's just like being like, okay, well, I guess I'll do it this way because I have to, not because he actually chooses to.
That's exactly the
point.
That way. I think that
he sees Priscilla disapproved in the top left corner and dies and resets it.
It's like that telltale box, and you're like, fuck, gotta reload.
Exactly.
Yeah, maybe that's an interesting point about it, which is just that Al does have a good quality underneath that Priscilla can see, obviously, but also I wonder if there's a lot of it in which they wouldn't be together this far unless Al forced his way through to get to this point.
Yeah.
I know for certain he's used his authority to cement the relationship he has with her. I don't know to what extent he's done that, though.
Yeah.
And we see the extent to that relationship to this very day. That's just how unwavering Priscilla is that in a moment's weakness, she'll kill you, even if you have a quote-unquote good relationship in his estimation.
Well, I wonder if she's just able to see through that and can tell that he's only saying what she wants to hear just enough to keep her satisfied.
That's what I mean, yeah. I think Al thinks too highly of his ability, or like he's not getting the point, right? Even as he goes through these painful situations, he's still like, I can manipulate this in the right way in which I can still feel my feelings and be with her,
But if she, like, as we were kind of discussing a bit earlier, if she has a deeper, like, even if she doesn't have a full understanding, if she has some sort of context, at least, or an idea of what Al is doing, do you think that changes her attitude of how she treats him compared to others?
I think it absolutely does. Yeah.
Because with Arakia, as we see in Arc 7, she has a similar attitude of disappointment, but she doesn't outright kill Arakia. Whereas
that's easier said than done.
Yeah. It seems like she's making a pointed choice to deal with Al in this way, as if she knows that this is the way she has to deal with him.
You're posing that she knows that if she kills him, it's not going to matter.
Yeah.
But also, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter for you as the person doing it, right? Because even if you knew that, right? This is my interpretation. Even if I knew, hey Chase, once I kill you, you're just gonna resurrect yourself some other time. So that's why you're acting this way. So I'm just gonna kill you. That doesn't change the fact that you're still dead.
Yeah.
To me.
Exactly.
So that's why I don't think she does it that way. I think she's just like, I've had enough of you trying to placate me,
But I think that both things can still be true in the sense of that she's doing that because you are dead to me in this moment, but she knows that this is a lesson. I don't know. It would seem, I think, a bit too out of character from what
that might. You're right. Maybe that's the reason why. It's also like, even if in that timeline, right, she goes the rest of her life with Al dead, right?
Yeah.
She knows that she told Al to try to do better in whatever next life he lives.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Because
I still don't think that there are additional timelines when this happens.
Right. If there is the same timeline, then it's fine. Yeah. To them, they probably have no concept of dimension either. So even if she believes that's how his authority works, then she's like, okay, just reset us back to then, and then you'll learn a lesson, right?
Yeah, she's
Yeah.
basically just hitting him over and over again until
Yeah.
he comes back.
Exactly.
Or it could be the complete opposite, and that he's proven so successful and so accomplished in every fight he's ever been in that she's assuming that just the threat of her swinging the sword at his head is going to get the point across, and he just never blocks it or is able to stop it.
True. Because it's true, because she's only seen the times when he succeeded in these crazy dire situations. So like technically there might be a timeline in which, say, instead of Al just like saying it and dying, she says it, she throws the fan, and then he blocks it somehow. And then he's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense.
That's I guess there's so many different theories we can kind of come up with this until we know more. But in that sense, it's interesting that we have these different ideas we can now posit because of this story, which I think is really cool. Two last things to note before we go on to the last side story, and probably the least important, I'd say.
Yeah, it's pretty quick.
Is that Al makes the point of saying, I decided to deal with every obstacle in Priscilla's way the day I swore to stop being a following star, which makes the point, and it intersects with our theory from the last phase, if any of the watchers and you guys remember, of thinking that Al is not playing his role. He's being naughty. He's defying fate in a very specific way by not being a following star anymore.
Oh, that reminds me. In one of these stories, Al actually makes a call out to like the Lord or Lady Fate in the exact same way that Subaru does a lot in Arc 1 and 2.
Yeah, exactly. And I was just about to say that because he does that right after thinking about this. At the end of this side story, he challenges fate just like Subaru does, which is God, the thematic like symmetry here between him and Subaru is just mwah. Oh, I'm eating it up. It's beautiful.
Yeah, he's following Subaru's lead, despite his best efforts to not be a following star. Even when we last leave him off, he has followed Subaru to Chaos Flame. Like, he's actively following the Pleiades cluster.
Yeah. So in this last side story of Priscilla, it's not like we get some more context as to how Priscilla's even here, but it's not like there's not too many amazing details here. Basically, we get some context to the relationship between Lagunica and Vollachia, and that about 400 years ago, before the contract with the dragon, Lagunica and Vollachia had constant military skirmishes with each other, and were basically at a constant state of war. So that's why their relationship has culturally always been a bit hostile with each other. Everyone's traveling together, the Priscilla camp, and including Heikel. Heikel is just being a weird man as always, and Al is just like confounded by how willing Heikel is to be just hated by everyone and going along.
Right, and it's also the fact that he is picking on Schultz and saying that he's saying something wrong. He's like, "Oh, it's an old fairy tale, right?"
Yeah.
Which is interesting because it's like you literally know, you probably know more than anyone that there's like the sword saint, the dragon, and then the the sage that sealed away Satel, blah blah blah. So you're like, no, there was no such thing as the dragon didn't make a pact with us 400 years ago. Makes very little sense, but I guess he's just being mean. I don't know.
Yeah. But they arrive at a harbour by the Tigracy River, which is near Priscilla, and it leads into the border of Vollachia through Barrio lands.
This is just be said, there's one huge river that divides the Great Four nations pretty much down the middle. Also, one thing that we got is talking about the fact that, compared to the kingdom and the empire and their fertile lands and amazing, diverse lands, Karagi and the Holy Kingdom Gusteco are pretty much just like bum places compared to them.
Yeah, they have to isolate themselves into more stronger communities than able to spread out with lots of farms and everything.
Yeah, very much.
That's why Karagi are city-states.
It very much feels like Vollachia and Lagunica are the superpowers of this world, right? Whereas Karagi and Gusteco are definitely almost fighting for their life and existence in this world.
Well, Gusteco is a very harsh place to live, and it's no wonder why it's like, oh, it's constantly snowing up there. Oh, there's crazy monsters and spirits all about. Good luck.
Because Gusteco is only organized as a nation because they have a unifying religion that they are all under. And Karagi isn't a nation. It's a landmass that's comprised of city-states, which means that they're all independent.
and we know how chaotic this like anarcho-capitalistic society seems to be. It's like it's pretty rough out there.
Yeah.
It seems.
I mean, they allow slavery there as well. Is one of the
Yeah.
big things they
Really, freely. I mean, yeah.
But yeah, we learn Al has spent 18 of his 20 years in this world in Vollachia, and he personally believes he has 0 good experiences when he was there, which I think speaks to how much he hates Vollachia and what he's gone through there.
I think it just means that Al sucked at being a Wallachian. We've met some people who seem to really enjoy living in Wallachia.
Yeah.
Medium's
Yeah.
having the time of her life every single day.
This
It's land of opportunity, Al.
this great
It
river
is.
that they're traveling down
Push stuff like
that travels through all these 4 nations is actually their major way of trade as well. They send boats down through this river to trade with each nation, which I thought was a really cool world building thing to learn.
And also to note, they also mentioned that, of course, the major trading hub is Priscilla, but there's many other port towns or cities along the river, as you'd imagine, that, is lesser than Priscilla. But just a thing to note that, yeah, there's boats traveling around this huge river that connects all 4, and that's where a lot of the trade happens. There's also probably one of the easiest ways to infiltrate to smuggle somebody into the Empire, pretty much, is just have a boat.
But as they're traveling down through the ship, and as they literally just enter the Empire, they get attacked by what is numbered as 20 river bandits, of which Heinkel is considering fighting, by the way, until I think Al makes the point of being like, yo, do you want Schultz to die? And Heinkel's being like his weird tsundere self of like, I don't want the child to die. He reminds me of someone who I wish someone was, specifically. So he stays back for a second. Priscilla then walks up to the bandit leader, whispers something to him, and all of the bandits fall to their knees. And it's revealed these bandits are actually the private troops of like an imperial noble that Priscilla knows personally.
Let me tell you, rereading this in preparation for this episode, seeing this name pop up just brought a huge smile to my face.
Oh yeah? That's good.
Yes. I mean, we're in Vollachia and we're getting involved in the full politics. This noble character, Serena Dracoi, does appear, and I am super glad that she got a name drop this early.
Yeah, it was. She seems like an interesting character. Apparently, she was a co-conspirator of Priscilla's ex-husband as well. So I'm very curious to learn more about her. But yeah, this is where the Priscilla stories end. They're in Vollachia, and that's who I am assuming is her collaborator that she mentions throughout the rest of early Arc 7.
Yes, you can assume that because these bandits escort them the rest of the way, probably to Dracoi. And then from there, we know that she does manage to get transportation to Quarrel, and then everything proceeds with the main story.
Yeah.
So the big things to hit from this are we get Al's perspective. We know that for certain that Priscilla is a member of the Imperial family, who either didn't compete or lost that competition for it, and they have made it in fairly smoothly with Heinkel in tow.
Yeah.
Who we haven't seen in the main story
Maybe we should do
yet.
overall thoughts on these specific side stories together as a conglomerate, quickly?
Necessary, quick. This could have been one chapter as an interlude.
Yeah. I genuinely, if Arc 7 is ever animated, they need to include this as content. Like, this is not up for debate, in my opinion. This should be something that is included at the start. But with that, I guess we can go into now the Dragon Nation / Missing Child Search Chronicle 1.
I think that this batch of story probably doesn't need to have that level of intricacies done.
The last half definitely doesn't. The last half definitely not.
Because like even these first 2 are just them having the conversation of what we're
going to do,
and then they go and do it.
But what I want to touch on a few cool character moments though, right?
Yes.
So
yes. Well, real quick, let me set the stage for this story.
Yeah, go ahead.
We are back at the Pleiades Tower with everyone else who's not Subaru and Rem and Rui, who are all discussing not only is Subaru and Rem alive, are they safe, where have they possibly gone, and what are we going to do about the fact that we just disabled all the defenses of the tower that is on top of Satella's seal? Like, huge problem, huge dragon. How are we going to deal with this? And how are we going to go and find Subaru?
They have a lot of problems. Basically, they're like, well, we got to make sure that we come back and we talk about this with people? And it's like, yeah, we sure ought to be secretive, but then it's like, it'll get out no matter what. Beatrice is like, stuff like this gets out no matter what. Like, this is a huge thing. It's not just some small situation. Remember what happened with Puck? And then Meili's like, oh, yeah. I that's what happened. Oh, that was around the same time that I bit Subaru, and it's like reminding you that that's where you first saw her.
Yeah.
And yeah, and really like Betty's like insulted. She's like, you have the nerve to say something after all this. Well, I'm super forgive you, but doesn't mean I have, right?
We even get an interesting thing where Beatrice considers the implications of what would happen if Roswell got access to the books of the dead. This would resurrect his evil plans. We cannot allow him to get access to the book of the
Yeah, that's why they're like, it's a lot easier if nobody else knows about this, but I think they're probably right. They're like, well, it's not like we just trust anybody here. I mean, I just trust whatever. But
Anastasia with Echidna spirit wrapped around her neck.
And
yes,
just
don't
waking
trust
up.
That.
Yeah, just waking up just now. She's like, oh, I've just come back to consciousness. What's going on, guys? Yeah, that person's somebody that's definitely formed the same emotional attachment and bonds to the rest of the characters throughout all this. And
there's also the demented dragon at the top of the tower that is not able to talk with anyone but Emilia, and even then, only 3 sentences. That's a bit of an issue as well.
Yeah, a bit of a communication issue, one could say.
I mean, I don't think they bring this up, but if the Kingdom of Lagunica found out that their divine protector dragon is a senile old man that isn't capable of like coherent thought anymore, there would be riots in the streets.
Yes,
100%.
Well, because it's actually a religious aspect to the nation too, right? Like
borderline religious.
It's like a founding myth, right? Pretty much. It's like we're descendant from the blood of a dragon. The dragon wants our nation to succeed. That sort of thing. It's like a rallying cry, pretty much.
It's like if America suddenly found out they had no military anymore.
Yeah, exactly like that. And it also makes it so that they are more weak, right? If other nations found out that Volcanica is like not with it anymore, then it's easy to attack, because the only times in which the Kingdom of Lagunica has like almost fallen in battle, like almost lost in battle plenty of times, but since those 400 years ago, the dragon always bails them out.
Well, that's why it's very good, for one, that Vincent is in charge of the Empire at the moment, or was until super recently, because he hasn't made any efforts to actually attack Lagunica. Yeah. And that's why they have the border locked down and Reinhardt hard patrolling it to make sure there's no risk of war while they're sorting out who's going to bind to the dragon. But yeah, there's also the issue of the giant magical sandstorm is no longer there, and everyone can just see the tower in the distance now because the world is flat.
Yeah, exactly. And also, there's mountains. Okay.
But they make the point of like, oh wow, Meili has become really important here, because she's basically the connecting line between the rest of the world and this tower. Because all of these witch beasts surrounding the tower, she's the only one that can really navigate them in a way that's not going to be extremely difficult. Apart from maybe Reinhardt, who can just brute force it.
I was going to say, Reinhardt and a lot of the knights together can probably fight their way through without much issue.
But it adds an element of like, oh, there's this now bigger importance to Meili. So they now decide Meili's going to have to go with some other people to the royal capital and get some help from maybe even the royal guard to investigate the tower, and deploy knights to protect it from the witch cult, because now it has like none of its protections.
Yeah. And also, speaking on that, the idea that Meili is really important now, Emilia is thinking about the fact that she would become the key to unlocking the Witch of Envy now, for the witch cult. Mm-hmm. And because that's really the only, because think about it, right? No, they don't have Reinhardt on their side if they wanted to clear that beast path. The only way to do it is to get their hands on Meili, right? So really, that's one of the key aspects of the next set of plans. And she's thinking to herself, Emilia's like, key. I don't really like the idea of another child becoming a key for the witch cult, you know? And that's a really good connection. That makes her start to
Yes.
be more endeared to Melee as this part of the chapter goes on. And, like she, they go ahead and shows us a lot of, Amelia this time has a lot of like introspective moments and a lot of like thoughts about like people, and it makes her feel a lot more human, that
Yeah.
way. There's a lot of like her being like, I don't really like this, going on or whatever,
One really major thing I enjoyed overall about these Emilia camp focused side stories is we get a lot of characterization for all of the characters in general, but especially Emilia, which was wonderful to see, I must say. Especially after I feel like the lack of characterization we got from her in Arc 6. Like we still got some stuff, but it wasn't
There was so
enough to
much
fill the
time
plate.
spent with her just being concerned for Subaru that we didn't get to see anything of her, really.
Yeah.
True.
But
The
now
main
we get to
intrigue was
see
about
this.
Subaru for the most of that arc, and it became kind of consuming to a lot of the character perspective. It was all about like how they saw Subaru, what's going on, how much do they trust or distrust, that type of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that happens, and basically, like they go and talk to Volcanica, and Volcanica gives Amelia a talon fragment. Also, talking about how the fact that dragons are like almost entirely made out of mana.
It's like
Yes.
masses of mana.
So there's with the word dragon here, this is also probably worth noting. Japan has 2 kanji for the word dragon that are pronounced the same way as Ryu or Ryu. It's one of them is literally just a like faster version of the other one. It's just something that evolved in Japan over time, almost like a slang, not slang, but it's just a shorthand character for the other one. But Tape does switch between one or the other when referring to ground dragons or flying dragons or water dragons. And
It's an
a
interesting
dragon
linguistic
like
thing, but honestly, yeah.
Volcanica.
Would an equivalent be like, say, for instance, like lowercase dragon, capital D big boy dragon?
Pretty
I
much.
think it's more similar to
Drake versus dragon.
no, it's like using a cursive D at the start of the word dragon rather than the regular one.
Yeah.
Where it's like this is the older original way that you would write it. Or maybe putting like a Greek letter at the front. It's still said and means the exact same thing normally. It's just in this case he's using that to differentiate between them.
Yeah, but basically what Beatrice meaning is that, there's the ancient dragon, now there's these like neutered dragons,
Yeah.
Lesser dragons.
Yeah, that exist. And they are not really the same mana sinks as before.
Yeah, they're pure beings of the true dragons are pure beings of mana, even more so than the spirits are, which make up a physical form but have mana as their just appearance. They still kind of have that spirit and essence of them, like their own ode. I don't know if the true dragons have one or not. If they truly are just pure mana in full essence, they might be more similar to like a force of nature than an actual being or existence.
So maybe outside of the rules of Ode Lagna in a sense, a little bit then.
Probably, which is also likely why it has so many issues communicating.
That's true.
That it just doesn't function on the same level that mortal beings do. But I like the idea that the camp comes to about why he gives them that fragment as basically there's a concept and mechanic that they use in a lot of Dark Souls games where there's just a giant enemy with a bow super far away. And if you're holding a specific item, then the arrows don't hurt you. Because like you're using that as like a flag to say, I'm with you, don't attack me. So it's like kind of I think they're assuming it's working sort of like a tracking beacon for him. That if he can sense his own mana, he knows not to attack that group.
Because because Emilia asks him to protect the tower, and he does it. He says the same 3 sentences he says in his senile ways, but they get the impression after he gives him he gives them the talent that he's probably understood what they've asked.
Right. Also, one thing I want to touch on is Melee in this part.
Yeah.
I feel really bad for Melee. I'm gonna say it. I'm a Melee truther.
I don't think I've ever like hated Melee.
Yeah.
Like at all. She's clearly been a victim this entire time.
Yeah,
Like
and
just someone
something
who's abducted and groomed and manipulated into
into
doing these
becoming a
things.
assassin, right? But also like her Emilia's like response to this with Melee is really endearing to me. She's like, "Hey, we'll figure out a way to make all this right. You can help people now. We'll help people with you, and if people, need you to help them and you can't, we'll help them with you. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?" And I feel like that's really nice. But also, to me, it's also I love the way Taipei seems to write her character, in which she has this like personality in which she's still being like almost like slightly manipulative and slightly like
Still a
pretending to be
little
all innocent.
sociopathic.
Yeah. But there's that because it's so trained in her that it's like not, she doesn't really understand how to connect to people yet. And I'm sure we're going to get more and more of that as time goes on, like, especially because I think she'll be important as we're talking about in the side story. Bringing this up now is going to be important because I think it's going to come back around.
Yeah.
Well, I want to propose the idea of it coming back around because the situation that Melee is in now, with, like, say, Emilia forgiving her in this case, and Beatrice and the others still being super wary about her, mirrors the situation that's going on with Rui, Rem, and Subaru as well. Where this is a kid who did terrible things in the past, but is now working actively with the heroes, and one side is completely willing and able to accept them in, and another group is not.
Which then highlights maybe another aspect of Subaru's identity crisis with his hypocrisy in that sense, right? Of him being very accepting of Melee. As Melee says, like, Subaru and Emilia are way too good-natured. But then we see this contrasting thing of Subaru rejecting Louis.
Right. And I really am interested in seeing where that's going too, because I honestly think, Subaru's relationship with Rui means a lot because it's him holding on to the hatred he has for other people is what it makes me feel like. Like he is projecting so much hatred and self-hatred onto Rui at this point that he doesn't really understand. It's almost automatic, you know what I mean? And you're right. Like when he has the choice, he's still that kind Subaru that we know at this point.
Yeah, and he's also softening up to her if it wasn't obvious already.
Yeah, we saw that, and it really just becomes a point at which how long can that dissonance last? For him with Rui, but for Melee it was instant because he understood. Like he had no qualm with her even when she attacked the mansion the second time, right?
I guess to Subaru, and I think this is a lot of the case for a lot of the rest of his friends and people he's close to, in some way they've harmed him or hurt other friends that he's close to.
Yeah, like Rem,
Rem tortured him actively.
Yeah.
Roswell,
so really it becomes a point where if he can see people's perspectives, it becomes a lot easier for him to forgive, right?
Well,
because like for Melee, it's obvious why she did what she did.
Yeah, but Rui and the other gluttony cultists as well are those who have inflicted a victim that Subaru hasn't been able to undo. Whereas everyone else who's hurt him, he's been able to go back and stop them from actually like causing permanent harm.
You're right, because really those are wounds that are inflicted to him that he can heal, right? The one wound that he couldn't heal was inflicted to him by these gluttonies, right? And now it's still not healed, and that's why he's so upset. I wonder if Rem had gone back to normal and then Louis was like this, right? Would he be like, okay, yeah, we'll figure this out? But because Rem is all,
Yeah. If Arc 3 Rem had told Subaru that he was being ridiculous and that this kid is clearly not the same monster, he would have listened to her in a heartbeat for it. But because she's still gone and that we have Provincial Rem, and that she's the one, and that Subaru's clearly like, oh, you're not in your right mind, you're not thinking right, this is a monster and you just can't see it, that it's projecting that idea of needing to protect her until she's better onto Rui as the scapegoat for it.
I think it's also projecting the idea of his idea of what being Rem's hero means as well. A very black and white view of the world. These are evil people.
Yes.
Mercy is not allowed.
And it's him trying to hold on to that in the Vollachian world, right? Where he's in Vollachia now, and there's so much gray, and that he's clinging so desperately to one black,
Yep, it's the only evil that's around, and that he can't do anything about it. But we talked a lot about that last time, so we should get back to the Dragon Nation.
But we one cool
so
thing.
they make plans to go back and establish, like, all right, we'll set up the knights, we'll have Melee act as like the crossroads for this, and we'll make sure that this doesn't like become a huge problem for everyone, and here's our way to get back and forth without too much of an issue.
Yeah.
The next two stories here, Missing Child 2 and Stand By Me, Pleiades 1, are kind of like intermixed. They're timeline-wise, so we can probably just treat them as one story.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. One kind of interesting thing is Julius and Anastasia swear to repay their debt to the Emilia camp, and they decide that they're gonna try and assist in this plan to help Subaru and Rem and Vollachia by doing the opposite of what the Emilia camp is planning to do in these stories, which is sneaking through the Lagunicum border to Vollachia, whereas Anastasia's camp, using their connection to Kararagi, are going to try and sneaking through the Kararagian lands into Vollachia.
I think that's even sneaking in. The Kararagi Vollachia
they're
border
trading,
isn't necessarily locked down.
Yeah. Which if it's like the Hoshin company, they'll be like, yeah, sure, the Hoshin company.
But they make the point of which I think is really like there's a really cool dynamic to this where they have to sneak in through the Lagunican border, Emilia's camp, to get closer to Subaru's side of Vollachia. But Anastasia and Julius going through Kararagi means they're on the further end of Vollachia away from Subaru. So it's going to take longer for them to get there to help. Yes. But they're not going to have as many obstacles as the Emilia camp is, which I think was a really cool thing.
But then as an interesting point as well, that's now revealed to you two that Julius and Anastasia are on their way to Vollachia and might show up in this arc. Who knows?
I just want to see Julius test his mettle against some of those Divine Generals, man. Anytime I see Julius fight, I get really excited.
If a war breaks out for like the throne again, like reclaiming Vincent's throne, which it will, the idea that eventually there'll be outside intervention, which what it'll seem like the Vallachian people, and also to Vincent. I wonder how he'll feel about that. You know what I mean? Because I think he wants it to all be done within his own power. If other people like Emilia Camp comes in, or people from the Hoshin Company come in, the Iron Fang, I wonder like what will he be like? Will he be like, okay, fine, this is what it has to take to get done, I guess, or will he be like, now I feel indebted to you guys. I'm not sure if I want that. Like you guys didn't have to come. This is all like super.
So now
like,
I have to help Emilia take the throne of Lagunica to repay my debt and make sure there's no issues.
He has to pay his reward. Yeah. Now this is funny because if you think about it, it's not outside intervention because this isn't Julius Aculeus, the Knight of Lagunica. This is just going to be Julie, the guy.
Oh, Jules, the mercenary with the Iron Fang.
I swear to you, if Tepe does not reuse that trope, I'm going to be so disappointed. When Julius, whenever he shows up, because it's going to be at a later stage in Arc 7 or Arc 8 that he shows up, but he's going to have a glorious entrance, and Subaru's going to be like, oh my god, Julius. And he'll be like, I'm not Julius, I'm Jules, you idiot. I'm just saying, it's going to happen.
Yeah, but
we last met at the subjugation of the White Whale. Don't you remember me?
yeah, the best bro reintroduction. And this is all set up for pretty much when an event occurs in the main story, right? Which there's going to be planning around it that we've seen as audience, or we could have seen, and it'll feel like a natural conclusion for all involved. And that's pretty much like this. What a lot of these side stories feel like to me, right? Even though it's weird to say that, right? Almost they shouldn't be side stories, right? I don't know how to do that. Yeah. I don't know how to phrase it, but it's like, should this just be in an appendix in the beginning, or should there just be cut in chapters? Like, I think the reason why he's reticent to do it because it's form and content, right? He has had for a very long time just Subaru's perspective, their entire book, pretty much, except for a few chapters here or there. And you get that breaking away from it for extended period of time in the same book for the same like light novel volume. I wonder if he's like thinking that'll turn people off. If like they flip to the second chapter and then it's like, okay, we're gonna have 3 chapters of Priscilla. I would like it a lot. But like,
I'll not explain what and when just to keep the story moving forward when we actually are going back to Arc 7 proper. But just know Tappei did learn from the mistakes here and has fixed it going forward.
Okay, that's good to hear. On that note, actually, I'm kind of interestingly, we get because even though we have some like important context and some well building and plot revelations in these side stories, I think one thing that is kind of important to the rest of the story too is we get some character stuff too, like some really nice character moments and dialogue that we don't get to see as much of in the main story, which I think helps build up what's going to happen next, right? Where we're going to have all these characters interact with each other, and we need these bonds to be established in these moments to have those moments feel impactful. So it's nice that we have this. And I hope that this, if it's ever adapted into anime, we have this shown for the anime.
And I'd like to talk about the character moments. I'm going to just briefly go over the events that transpire here between Chronicle 2 and Pleiades 1.
Yeah.
The main camp is heading back from Pleiades. From the Pleiades Tower, they have a long walk to get any information out, but they send a letter ahead of time. Roswell finds out that they're on their way back and uses a bind that he has with Klein, apparently, that he can trade amounts or uses of mana or magic in order to let Klein use an authority to teleport around the world. Yeah. And he goes and gets everyone from Priscilla.
Yeah.
I think he cuts like half of the time away from the Emilia camp as they're coming back from Pleiades. He meets up with Klein and Anna Rose, has some dialogue and conversations with them, before getting everyone aside from Klein and Anna Rose
I
properly
like
gathered back at the mansion.
This is implying something about that authority, which is just like, is it like crushing space and time? Like that's what it feels like to me. Like it feels like it's translocating things. Like it's weird like that. It's like truncating it, you know?
It feels, it's almost like vacancy. And if you can combine that idea of vacancy with him asking a price from Roswell, and the way he's making it seem is like almost as if it's not like mana or using up a magic spell. It's like he's actually giving away magic that he can never use again. Is the sense I was getting from Roswell.
It's because it's like 4 uses of magic is the price cost for it. Now, it's not a secret that those of us here hate Klein and wish he just wasn't in the story. So I'm not going to give him the time of day to discuss him deeper, other than, hey, that's a neat authority to have. That will come up later.
And
you know what? I still am holding out hope that Klein is secretly just pretending to be like this and has an actual personality.
Oh my god, please!
Like he's like
or
an evil
just
person
Hector wakes back up and he's not Klein anymore.
Exactly. Is that something like that? Yeah.
For a tiny amount of context to the audience, Klein is one of those very few characters in ReZero that I genuinely put in F tier as a character I wish was not in the story. Or at least in his current form was not in the story. Because, oh my god, any time he has an interaction with any character that is underage, my spine shivers.
If it's not Subaru, it's uncomfortable.
Yeah,
That's just the way that Klein's interactions entirely go. So we'll move on from him. And everyone else is gathered at the mansion to discuss the proper plans. And thank God they went and got Otto, because, oh my god, they had no idea what to do without this man.
Even Roswell has no idea what to do, because he doesn't have his book anymore. A really, like, a fun world-building thing I wanted to mention here is they mention that the carrier birds that they, like, use to send messages in this world are sealed by, like, magic seals to stop interception of communication. And the reason that's even a thing in the first place is because the Roswell of 2 generations ago started using it, and it just got adopted by the wider kingdom of Lagunica in general, which I think is such a cool world-building thing.
It is. It's a nice little thing. We also learned that it's exclusively used by the nobility and rich, so sorry everyone else, no mail for you.
Yeah. I figure that you probably need a house mage or something to do that, you know?
But apparently maintaining these birds is a big upkeep on noble families. But the reason why this is an important detail is that as we have all these events which Roswell is learning about from a letter, and he starts to like panic because like, oh fuck, Subaru isn't with the group, everyone can die, my plans can go wrong, I've got to sort this out. Petra has been getting trained in magic by Roswell, which is a really important thing to establish, I think, at least from what I understand.
Trained in basically everything by either Roswell, Frederica, or Rom. In one form or another, she's been trained in basically every subject over this last year. She's going to
become the best mage. She's taking all the best aspects of every single one.
And she's also becoming a really great leader and person in the camp too, is a thing we learn throughout all these Emilia camp focused side stories. Petra is a force in her own. I think Otto refers to her as one of the big 3 of the camp.
Yes, he does. Like, if Subaru and Emilia aren't there, then apparently Petra's effectively in charge.
Which is
Yeah, well, in a way, like emotionally manipulating people to get on the right track. That's pretty much what she does.
But
You know, she-
I am loving Petra's characterization in these side stories. I love it. I love Petra. She's so sweet. She's got starting to have a really compelling character arc, and I really am excited to see where she goes from here.
13-year-old Petra
hate,
is a big jump in upgrade from 12-year-old Petra.
Yeah.
Yeah. She this year has been really, she's been doing a lot.
She's been cooking.
Yeah.
We also see that Beatrice, Petra, and Anna Rose are like Roswell's 3 weaknesses.
Yes.
That if they are disappointed or sad for him for any reason, it genuinely hurts him.
It's interesting. I mean, one of the things that I kind of understand is that, of course, Ram is a big weakness. I never got the impression that he was that close to Anna Rose, and I guess we just figured out that. I mean, maybe we know why, right? But also, like, the idea that Petra has become such a huge force in such a little time, such an amusing concept.
Well, I think that part of it is so the Roswell that we've known so far in the story, up through Arc 4, because he wasn't in 5 or 6, like barely at all, is the one who had this book of wisdom that he was following to the T's. He had like a guiding force, an instruction manual to do for the last 400 years. Similar to how Betty was following a single instruction, but an instruction nonetheless, for 400 years. And both of them just haven't grown or matured in that time at all.
Yeah.
So Roswell is, to me, still feels like this 19-year-old kid that just adores Beatrice, adores Ryuzu, wants to please all the women in his life.
But
and
he's
so
playing
these
the role that he of someone he isn't.
Exactly.
Also, I think that's part of it too, but now that I think about it, it's also probably the fact that everyone else has seen what he was like beforehand and then were betrayed by his expectations. Petra came in exactly as this change in his life occurred. So really, he has a fresh start with her exactly. So it means a lot to him to have her, like him. Because it gives him, he's the only person that doesn't see him as somebody who betrayed their trust and is a horrible monster because of it. She just knows that he made a mistake and that he's trying to fix it.
She's also the one that started with a negative relationship, just like Rom. So he probably has that kind of similar connection there. Whereas like Frederica and Anna Rose didn't have a bad perception of him when they first meet him, like Petra and Rom do.
We get a really funny moment in this side story when Otto is back with the rest of the crew and he's trying to help decide what's going on. And he has this really funny moment where he starts complaining about, man, why did it have to be Vollachia of all places? Why couldn't it be Guesteco or Kararagi? Why did it have to be Vollachia? The most difficult thing for me to reconcile here. And everyone makes fun of Otto for being like a drama queen, and it's really fun.
He is being a drama queen. None of that's easy. It's all super far away.
But
thankfully, Otto does have a way for them to get in. And that's by going back to his hometown and getting illegally smuggled across the border. Good job, Otto. Internal Affairs Minister, ace, job well done. It's also nice to see Garfield back in the main, not in the main story yet, but in getting back with the group.
We love Garfield.
We haven't seen that since Arc 5 ended.
He's also really sad and regretting that he was not there to protect Subaru. I just love Subaru and Garfield's dynamics so much. Like, how much Garfield looks up to Subaru and wants to protect him because he knows he's, like, stronger than Subaru, but he respects Subaru's other strengths. It's just, like, there's such a nice dynamic. Yeah, I love the Three Idiots, Three Brothers part of the Emilia camp. It's really compelling. But
yeah, we're kind of getting those clicks in the group, and Subaru so far is in all of them.
Yeah, which makes him being vacant feel ever more present throughout all of these stories, especially for the characters.
Yeah, because they kind of lack direction when all of them are together and Subaru's not there.
I mean, Beatrice even talks about how her heart needs a dose of Subaruline.
Yes.
She starts using Subaruisms constantly throughout these stories. She's just explaining her absolute lack of Subaru and how she needs him back right now.
Quick thing, we also should note on that Beatrice is making the point that they only have like a couple of months before either she dies or Subaru literally explodes from mana poisoning. And so she has to go on, as she calls it, battery saver mode,
Yes.
another Subaruism. Basically just laying down on the couch with her eyes closed as much as possible and not doing any excess work.
I kind of like, and it's cute one, but it's also very fun. Like it's part funny, part kind of sad. At this point, I still hope we get more Beatrice, stuff later. Just how her entire life is like, and I am craving my Subaru. It's like obviously, she's really attached to him for great reason, but it's like this sort of like state that she's in right now is both cute but also kind of sad. It's just like and obviously the fact that it hurts her a lot to be away from him.
Yeah, I think in story there's also that explanation though of whilst in a sense like it's sad that she has like this most singular devotion focus to someone, there's a point where every character is saying that like they can't function without each other. They are literally in a symbiotic relationship because if they are separated, they die. Right?
It's the most dependent of this interdependent sort of clan, right? This sort of the faction, right? And of course, the faction works out because they're a bunch of misfits, and of course, it's Subaru around the center of it because he kind of put them all together through his actions. But like the idea that basically they're kind of all trying to figure out where they stand, without a core member of their team is very realistic and endearing for a lot of these characters that we like and we are rooting for.
I almost completely forgot too, on the subject of the mana poisoning with Subaru, Beatrice makes a point to say the Subaru will completely collapse when it takes over him and his ode will be exposed. There's no explanations to what exactly that ode exposing means, but you can only think that it means either someone can manipulate him or literally see into the contents of his ode, which adds huge ramifications as to what could happen in the future of the story. Because imagine if someone got a hold of Subaru's ode and was able to see what had happened in his memories. It would be very similar to reading a Book of the Dead, I think.
Probably. Although, honestly, I think Subaru probably burned a huge chunk of the mana that was in his body when the curses were repairing his arm after the event with the snake.
Yeah, that's
so I don't think he's in as much danger of that as Beatrice is of fading away.
Yeah.
That's the more pressing concern than Subaru having too much mana.
But yeah,
hopefully months are enough. I mean, they say month is definitely not, going to be not going to wait an extra month, but I mean, hopefully it's been 2 weeks, probably another 2 weeks before they get there. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, but yeah, they head off to Otto's hometown, one of the 5 major cities of Lagunica. Pictat?
Poctat.
Poctat.
They used a different word in each of these freaking translations.
Yeah, which is why
I'll find the name for it.
But it's the commercial city.
Poctat. Yes, it's the one in which Otto is from, his family, the Suin company, and they are, it's that weird desert-y, arid place, and they come back there, and what happens first? Is it the perspective of this person?
Their family, or Otto's family, intercepts them and drags them back to the family manor first.
Yes.
And so we finally get to have proper conversations with his mom and dad.
It's so
and find
cute.
out just how capitalistic this place is. Like, damn, Otto's dad. Put Anastasia to shame.
Frederica is relieved that Otto is a fugitive in his hometown, by the way. She's like, oh, thank God that you have something like dark and mysterious about you. This is fantastic. Frederica is like ecstatic, and Otto is like, excuse me, what?
I think him being just so normal and so, miserable is just like, people are like, we like picking on you so much, so hopefully you have something there that makes us feel a bit better about you,
But
Pikutato. Is how it's written.
But basically, Otto and Frederica is a much better ship than Frederica and Klein. Get that shit out of here. Out of here.
Yeah, I mean, obviously.
But
Minor side quest. Speaking of ships, Rom and Petra go and deal with the girl that Otto offended however
I
many
know,
years
right?
ago and resolve
That-
that in like 10 minutes. Good
All
job,
I'll say
girls.
is just how crazy it is that Petra is just like holding it down so easily.
Yeah.
It's this girl that he assaulted. We get a little bit of her like perspective in a similar way of like the Secure Osmond chapter for a bit, and then it's just like, okay, we're gonna kill you, and she's like, please don't, and
I
he's
just
like,
want to have sex with his brother. That's all.
Yeah,
that's like,
that's the whole
"Please,
revelation.
please," and she's like, yeah, we'll get you guys set up. That solves it.
It's all it is she's just like, yeah, apologize to me, and also, what does your brother like? And that's just the end of it. We don't see any more from that, and that's all we needed to see.
But while
Petra-
there,
The
they
character.
managed to get some connections to actually do a smuggle and put together a proper cover story for their entrance into Vollachia, which
Yeah.
is the important part of this side story that I needed to make sure you guys hit and had established.
Right.
But one last thing about this story that I really enjoy is from the characterization of Emilia, we just see straight up that she definitely has feelings for Subaru, that she's not fully wording in her brain yet. And Petra notices and is making fun of her, and that is funny.
Oh, as a quick thing, they sent Melee with Klein and Anna Rose to go to the capital to have
Yes.
those three get everything set up, while Garfield, Otto, Rom, Frederica, Petra, Roswell, Emilia, and Beatrice are all headed to Wallachia.
Because
The
I don't
whole
know.
Emilia camp.
I'm actually like, I guess Klein can hold it down, but I'm like, when are we gonna get Anna Rose for some reason around? I guess maybe later. I don't know. But it feels weird that they're just like, this is a character in our faction that we're gonna talk around a whole bunch, but focus on her? No, never.
I feel like we're gonna have a name chapter of her later on in the story, and all it's gonna be is Roswell taking her over. That's my current running theory.
Maybe. I mean, she
might
seems
be
kind of
more
interesting.
involved when they get involved in the nobility of Lagunica and do stuff with like Felt and Reinhard.
Because I honestly think that she's kind of interesting because I just like the idea because a few side stories I've had her in it. She's just always like putting the "I'm having a party today, please don't mess it up," and then they always mess it up, and she's like, "Oh my goodness, guys, you messed it up again." I'm supposed to be all fancy.
I definitely think as they
For you
focus
fans
more
at home, Anna Rose is the one that told Amelia that kissing leads to babies, and Puck just never corrected her on that. Granted, she was like 5 at the time, so I mean, fair to her, but still, funny
It
little
is
tidbit.
very funny. But I definitely think we'll see more of her as we learn more about the internal politics of Lagunica. Not even just in the Felt Reinhard stuff, but also as we get to the end of the selection. I feel like we'll get a bit more focus there.
Maybe Roswell at one point will just die, and Anna Rose has to be the one backing her instead. Who knows?
Maybe he'll make the active choice not to take over Anna Rose because
I think that's the end of his arc. Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe that is the end of his story.
Yeah,
but
maybe he has the
regard-
ultimatum. He's like, I could do this, but I'm just gonna not. I'm gonna spare it. Maybe
can't
that's
do
his
much
last
for her.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Subaru just tells him, I'm going to reset until you don't do it, so it's never going to happen. And
I
then
feel like,
that's the
and
end
then
of it.
Roswell would answer something along the lines of, I already knew that and took that into account. I'm not going to do it.
So we get these set up for their cover story and plan, is that everyone is going to be Petra's servants, as she is a fleeing noble from Lagunica into Vollachia. Lady Petra.
Amazing,
Petra-sama!
amazing stuff.
And we get some nicknames for everyone, including my favorite one, which is Roswell is Dudley.
He's gonna start
It's just
boxing
so
you.
insulting.
He's a boxer.
These were some great side stories focusing on the Emilia camp. I really enjoyed some of the characterization we got to see here. And it was nice seeing a bit more context as to what they were doing while Subaru is getting busy getting killed in Vollachia right now.
As a note, the smugglers are mole people that they abduct them and ransom them back, and then eventually they get out and make it to Vollachia. That's the end of these side stories. They're not translated. That whole side plot is kind of irrelevant. Other than this actually doesn't happen in the part you two read. But in order to get out of this situation, Petra goes in and makes a capital O oath with these mole people smugglers. That at one point they'll get to talk to the candidate Emilia to make sure she doesn't start another civil war. And that's the extent of it. But we do also get the revelation that Petra is one of the rare users of Yang magic.
She's a Yang magic user? Isn't she also a water magic user?
Nope,
She's
that's
just
not been
Yang?
shown at all. It's just Yang. That was shown in the tunnels where it's like completely pitch black, and Roswell takes the opportunity to teach her how to see other people as mana sources, and she can kind of see the world in pink instead.
It's so cool that she's a Yang magic user, considering her relationship with Subaru as well. I think that's really cool. Yeah, that wraps up those side stories. Great reads, honestly. I guess we can quickly get into some of the provisional REM stuff. There isn't loads of stuff here, just a couple character moments and one big thing.
Yeah, the thing to note from these is that we do just get to see stuff from Ren's perspective. The first one of these is honestly just this is side story. It's not actually necessary, but it's just the first one of the bunch.
Yeah.
The second one is where we find out that Abel did indeed tell Rem that Subaru was going to fail on his first attempt to leave with her, and that she shouldn't have any expectation to have that succeed and should be ready to come back. Which is nice, because when this came out, there was no proof on that of whether Rem was planning to leave Subaru or not. We were just having to take her at her word that she wasn't. And then we get this side story showing us that Vincent or Abel did indeed tell her, "You're going to fail. Like, don't stay." And then it'll come crawling back to me. But after that, we kind of get the cool stuff where we're getting to see Rem with Priscilla in the Priscilla camp there.
One thing first with that moment between her and Abel. Abel has a really interesting quote in response to Rem saying she wants to run away, in which he tells her, "I am war itself. Where do you intend to hide from me? What land is there that will keep you hidden from me?" Bro sounded like a bad guy in a shonen manga.
I mean, in a lot of other stories, Abel could very well be the bad guy.
Yeah.
He's only the good guy here because he's not working with Todd, who was causing Subaru deaths.
Yeah.
Otherwise, Subaru could very well have worked with the Vollachian nobility and said, like, there's a rebel prince who's attempting to usurp the throne that's claiming to be the emperor, but he's not. And he just burned down our camp of soldiers and attacked the city. And Abel would seem like the villain, and Subaru would have to fight to stop him instead. It's just a matter of perspective.
But Rem is now, we transfer to Rem being in the fortress city. She's helping with cooking and laundry in the mornings, and then also doing meetings in the afternoons and evenings with Priscilla by bathing her and just entertaining her in general. And we learn that before everyone leaves and Rem is saying goodbye to everyone, she notices that Al is looking at her. Even through the helmet, she can understand that he is looking at her with hatred. Like actual dark, pure black hatred. And disdain.
Wait, I thought Al couldn't remember who Rem was.
I think he's a filthy liar!
Yeah, so Rem can tell that, for whatever reason, Al recognizes her, which is a little callback to Arc 3, when Subaru is talking with Al about Rem and Ram, and Al is asking, "Oh, do you mean Ram?" And he's like, "No, it's her twin sister Rem," and that pisses him off for some reason. And since then, whether it involved Rem or it involved Julius or anyone else who had their names eaten, Al has always claimed not to know who this person is.
Which now
I think
a lie.
Yeah.
I think we can say safely.
He's absolutely lying about it. He has full memory of all of it. He just has to play it off like he can't.
And
which is probably just more evidence to make Subaru the hero or the sage.
And I think the reason we can argue the mechanics of why that works is because of Al's authority. Even if their names are wiped out in the current timeline or memory stream that they're in, he's known them in previous ones, so they don't get overridden. I think is the mechanic, you could say, that works around that, at least from what we could guess right now.
Or just the fact that they're from Earth.
Yeah.
Makes them immune to it.
But we then learn that Rem is every now and then in the mornings is seeing Heinkel train. And she makes the point of telling him that your meanness is inconsistent because he drew water from the well for her to help her, but he trains and then drinks all day. She is the first, I think, character I've seen in the story that's like straight up told Heinkel, your actions are inconsistent with what you're doing. Like, who are you? And she makes the point of noticing that he loves and hates the blade. He looks at it with distaste, but handles it with care. It's like love and hate mixed together, which is clearly... this is all clearly influenced by his feelings towards his parents, right?
To that, and it's also reflecting the way that Rem feels about Subaru and herself at the moment.
Yeah. But in a rather funny moment, Heinkel is roped into helping Rem with breakfast preparations and Schultz.
Yeah, because he can't say no to Schultz.
Yeah.
Who can say no to Schultz? He's just the sweetest little boy.
And then we get an interesting moment between Priscilla and Rem where she's just like, yeah, Heinkel is an ugly person, but when he waves around the sword, it's quite beautiful, isn't it? And she makes a point of telling her that, you know, a garden full of just beautiful things perhaps makes it a common garden. You need to have some ugly adornments with a bit more going on to be able to make a garden truly beautiful.
I think that is the most deep that we could get into Priscilla's mindset that we have had so far.
Yeah.
Her, that even though she's talking about like beauty and appearance, you can infer that she can mean that even though Heinkel's like a broken, like devastated person that has all of his conflicts, she is able to still see the good in him, even if no one else can.
Yeah.
Like there is something worth existing for there.
And I feel like this is definitely some major setup for stuff that Heinkel is going to do in the future of these two arcs. I feel like Heinkel's going to play a big role in some way.
Yeah. And really it's just like there's a lot here that, you know, I think both him and Rem, or like, sorry, both Rem and Priscilla's like interactions here and her interaction with everybody is just very interesting. She's getting a lot of insight. One of the things that I want to touch on is she's like, you know, very much so throughout this, you know, run of chapters, just figuring out who she is. And it comes back to this theme of identity the story has. But also, where does confidence come from? Where does confidence in who you are come from? And really, where does like beauty come from? I guess from Priscilla's perspective, it's being like it's being confident in who you are is usually what I feel like it must be, right? As well.
There's also what she's imposing onto Rem is that you have this amazing skill as well, and you should like learn to work with it. And I'm gonna like force you to be better because you're really ugly at healing right now.
Yeah, 100%. Go ahead.
For the last little moments for the Rem's like little side stories that we've read so far, we get some cute little moments between her and Holly and Kuna, and Holly like explaining some mechanics of how like soul sisters work in the Shudrak society, and what a guardian is, which is basically a protector of the village and the person that raises the children, and a hunter, as someone that like hunts. But
yeah,
Kuna and Holly
this is also the most
guardians, and then
this is the most conversation we get from Kuna as well.
Yeah. Kuna and Holly were guardians together and then became hunters together when they combined their eyesight and the bowmanship. And all of this makes Rem think about the sister that Subaru has told her about. And Kuna and Holly like advise her on it and tell her to think about it. And she taps into her synesthesia for a second and sees a faint pink presence, which means that she just saw Ram. Whoa! I was not expecting this to be in the side stories.
Well, she felt Ram, from really far away.
Yes. But the fact is that she knows that Ram is real.
Yeah, maybe this crazy boy who smells really bad is worth listening to.
Well, I found it quite interesting throughout these stories too, because there's a Rem makes a point in her narration where as she goes through her relationship with Subaru now, she's less she has less distaste for him and is more just afraid of him at this point and confused by him, which I think is kind of interesting.
It's also incredibly fair.
Yes. Subaru does not act in a way that is fair to Amnesia Rem here at all. But yeah, those are the Rem side stories that for now for the required reading. Did you boys read the optional side stories we could have read here?
I think I read those when they came out, but I did not read them in preparation for today's episode.
I will
And
do.
honestly, we're getting a little close on time.
Ooh, okay. I will do like a quick couple points from these then. So just for the first story, we see Abel's perspective. He's in the graveyard of Emperors, which he tells us about in Arc 7 and how he teleported there from the throne room to escape. This is where all the Emperors of past have been buried, and they keep treasures there to help an Emperor who's fleeing, which is kind of interesting. This graveyard is located right next to the Great Waterfall, by the way, which is a really cool moment, I thought, and it makes Abel think about like the expanse of the world and like how this is a fresh start for him. We now also learn that the Yang sword is a sword that's passed down from emperor to emperor in Vollachia, which means that Priscilla having the Yang sword is like kind of a contentment issue, you could say.
It's probably the reason why there's only supposed to be the one, that they have to all kill each other otherwise.
Yeah.
It's that only the one person can pull out the Yang sword.
But yeah, and then we just see all the events that lead to Abel meeting Subaru. Abel giving Subaru the knife, not because he actually wants to help him, but because if an assassin kills him, he'll think that he's killed Abel because he has his knife. And that's that story. And the second story focuses on Todd and Jamal fighting the witch beast that Subaru sticks on them in the forest. And this is something I actually really want to talk about, specifically because Todd tells Jamal after they've killed this witch beast in the fight that he needs to go wash off all the blood off of him because he stinks. And Todd's like, "Oh, I smell some water over there. You go do that." Todd then poisons one of his comrades and kills all the other people that were involved with the witch beast subjugation. And then Jamal comes back and Todd tells him that, "Oh yeah, all those cowards ran away." So, for some reason, Todd killed all the other people that were involved with that. I don't know if that was to make sure the reward wasn't split and he got maybe more concentration on the reward, and the only reason he kept Jamal alive was due to consideration towards his fiancée or whatever. But that's just an interesting thing to note. But that
It could also be that
stories.
he didn't want to reveal that the witch beast was there to everyone, because
Yeah.
that can cause panic as well. It's not supposed to be there.
Yeah.
And I
yeah.
definitely did read those a long time ago. I remembered those story beats as
Yeah.
well.
Interesting
too.
story beats. What are your thoughts overall, gentlemen?
I think a lot of these were really good. I genuinely really like seeing. I felt a lot for Rem in her side stories. Her scaredness in the first like side story, it just like made me really sad because like it was so understandable. Like giving it from her perspective exactly makes so much sense. She's like, who even is men? You know, are all men scary?
Oh
They're
yeah,
all
I
these
forgot
vicious
that the only people who are like nice
who
to her at the beginning are all
objectify.
women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All these people who objectify me or like throw me around or call me something that I don't know. What is Rem? That seems like a gross name. It feels like he's insulting me almost. You know, like all these things that are like just so gross to her. And I feel really bad. And I understand exactly why she acted the way she did now, you know. And like that, and also like her Priscilla and hers interaction is just so endearing because I mean we see more about Priscilla, but like just how open Priscilla is gives people that confidence to try to unlock their own true potential. I think that's what and she does it a lot very like gently with Rem here, which makes me like her a lot because she definitely has that attribute in her up to this point. Even in some of the side stories that we read with Priscilla, she kind of acts very coldly and logically, but in these like very intimate moments, she can be very clear and wise. And I think that's a respectable thing about her. But she also holds people to high standards, right? Which I think is very nice to her. Like when people ask her a question, he's like, "Come on, you should know that. Like, don't ask a hypothetical to me. Like, you can answer for yourself, you know." Or like, "Why do I do this?"
You already know the answer to what you're asking.
Or like you're questioning this as if I don't already have thought of this myself. Like, let's be real. Let's be honest here, you know. And I find that a fascinating thing. But she's not mad at it when she does it with Rem. You know, she's just teaching her because she understands the position she's in. So like the fact that she has Rem as such like a solid person, just like Subaru has with Vincent almost, where it's just like, you know, here's somebody that I can mirror off of. That's actually the good parallel here, which is just like, Subaru is figuring out who he is through Vincent, or trying to refigure out who he is with Vincent, and Rem is doing it through Priscilla, and that is their own Vollachian royal family cultural exchange program.
Mhm. Just endear all the Vollachians to people who are in the Emilia camp. Eventually, they'll just all support her and put her on the throne. And that'll be how that goes at the end.
Yeah, overall, side stories, absolutely great. I don't think these are really side stories. I feel like most of these are just required and important. Not even just in terms of context, but in characterization. We get a lot of good characterization for the Emilia camp, for Rem, for Priscilla, for Al, for Abel too. I
For
loved
Heinkel,
reading
weirdly.
these.
For
And
the Heinkel was the
yeah.
surprising one to
Heinkel
me.
was
I
the
did not
surprising one.
remember him in this side story when I read these that time ago.
I feel like this is definitely setting up something more for Heinkel in this part of the story. So I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, I think the Straya family is going to be huge.
Well, with Wilhelm and Reinhard out of the not in this country at all, there's a real chance for Heinkel to distinguish himself as a swordsman here amongst others.
Interestingly, you make that point. Do you think? I almost feel like Heinkel may be like a more dark mirror to Subaru in the sense of how Heinkel's inferiority complex to his father mirrors Subaru's inferiority complex to his father, right?
What if Heinkel and Rowan Segment become friends, and then they have to duke out the feud of their children?
Oh my god!
I can't say anything.
I think you cooked with that gold. I won't lie.
I do feel like I cooked.
But with that was today's episode of the ReZero podcast. If you watched up until this point, thank you so much. I hope you had as much fun watching this as we did reading and talking about these side stories. If you have any thoughts in the comments, please tell us. We read all of them and we love to hear from you guys. But with that, have a wonderful day or evening where you are, and goodbye!
Bye!